Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining the Spiritist Talk series hosted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I am quite happy to host this talk by Marcelo Medeiros, who will be leading our live with the theme Scientific Spiritism Practical Insights for Life. Let's all give Marcelo a very warm welcome. But please allow me to introduce him before he starts his presentation. Marcelo joined Spiritism in the 2000s and has been a worker in the Spiritist movement in the US since 2012, providing assistance in the area of media communications. He currently lives in Georgia and is an active member of Caritas Spiritist Group. Professionally, Marcelo works as a journalist in Atlanta. Please, everyone, take this opportunity to send your questions during the presentation using the chat window. Marcelo has reserved time to address your comments and questions once he concludes his presentation. And now, Marcelo Medeiros.
Hi, Brad. Thank you so much for having me here today. And it is always good to be here talking about Spiritism. And today, this topic that I chose, Scientific Spiritism, Practical Insights for Life. First, before going to this talk, let me explain a little bit why I chose it. The reason is because we usually see that when we talk about Spiritism, we are talking that Spiritism is at the same time a science, a philosophy, and a religion. So we have these three aspects of Spiritism, and it's very easy for us to see Spiritism as a religion because it is a way for us to connect to God. Religion, which is from the Latin word religare, which means to reconnect. So it is our reconnection to God, to the source. It's always also easy for us to see the philosophical aspect of Spiritism, especially when we study the codification by Allan Kardec, when we see the way, his way of thought and all this philosophy that it brings to us, especially when we see the Gospel according to Spiritism, right in the introduction, when he talked about Plato and Socrates. So we know that we have these roots in philosophy, and the way that we study Spiritism today, the way that we see Spiritism, it is rooted in philosophy. But many times it can be difficult for us to see the scientific aspect of Spiritism, and that is something that I've heard before in some study groups. People saying that Spiritism is not a science because we cannot prove that inside the laboratory. For example, they say that we cannot, there is no machines that can prove that spirits exist. There is no way for us to get a communication from a spirit using any kind of machines, or we cannot like touch anything, we cannot see anything. So I've heard many times people saying that or saying that Spiritism is not a science, or complaining that it's difficult to understand why we say that Spiritism is a science. So the reason I brought it for us to understand why we consider Spiritism a science, and more importantly, how can we use the science within the Spiritism to reach the goal of the Spiritism, which is for each one of us to better ourselves, to evolve, and to become better human beings. So first, let's talk a little bit about what is science. So I have here this definition from the Science Council. The Science Council, they say that science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence. So what is really important here for us to see, they say the natural and the social world, because I'm going to talk specifically about the social world and the social sciences here. So a few of the methodologies that we have here when we are talking about science, we have objective observation, we have evidence, experiment, and or observation, critical analysis, verification, and testing. So science is not only what happens inside a lab. There is much more beyond that. So there are many ways that we can use scientific methods in our lives. There are many other science happening around us that many times we do not notice. And that's important for us when we are talking about Spiritism, to see those two aspects of science, the natural one and the social one. And when we go to the book, What is Spiritism by Allan Kardec, Spiritism, according to Kardec, he says, is simultaneously a science of observation and a philosophical doctrine. So here he's talking about these two aspects, about philosophy and science. And when he's talking about science, he's saying it's a science of observation. So it's not saying it's a science of measurement. So we are not going to measure like the distance from here to the moon and to do some equations. Is not about math, it's not about physics. What here he's saying here is a science of observation. And he says, Spiritism is a science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits and their relations with the corporeal world. So let's go back to the time of Kardec. So Kardec, when he started to see the phenomena happening around him, when he started to see the table turnings and the communications they were receiving from the spirits in many different places around the world, he started to question that, and he wanted to prove that it was accurate, what he was receiving, and that it was actually a communication from the spirits here to our physical world. So that's what he did. He was observing what was happening. For example, he went to the table turns places in France, in Europe, and he saw that they were really happening without the help of any human being. For example, it wasn't someone who was turning the tables, but people weren't touching the table. And it was really the action from the spiritual world upon the physical world. So that's from his observation. And when he says here the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits, we need to understand that we are all spirits. So when he's talking about that, he's not only talking about the spirits who are discarnate, but also us who are incarnate. So Spiritism is about us who are living, all of us who are living here on planet Earth at this moment, because we are the ones who are here. We are the ones who are going to go back to the spiritual world. We are the ones who keep having this exchange between the physical and the spiritual world. So we cannot I'm back. Sorry about that. So we cannot talk that Spiritism is only an action that is about the spiritual world, but it's about us here in the physical world. It's about how we live here and how can we improve the life that we have here in this world as well. So the first thing that I need, that I wanted for us to question and to see this scientific aspect is when we go to the first question of the Spirit's book, the first few questions when Kardec is asking the Spirit about what is God. And one of the answers that we have in question 4, the Spirits talk and say to Kardec this: in the premise that is applied in science, there is no effect without a cause. So we see here that is the spirits are bringing science to Kardec. It's not Kardec that is talking about science this time. So the spirits are bringing this premise from science for us to understand what is God. So they are saying, investigate the cause of anything that is not the work of human beings, and reason shall provide the answer. And Kardec says, to believe in God, simply observe the works of creation. The universe exists, therefore there is a cause. Doubting the existence of God would be to deny that every effect has a cause, and to presuppose the idea that something could be created from nothing. So here we have this science of observation, because we are not ready to fully understand what God is. So like until a few centuries ago, we human beings were thinking about God as a human being just like us. Like that image that we had, that old man sitting in a chair in heaven, and then the Spiritism come, and the spirits at the time of Kardec come and say that it's not that, it's more than that. So we know that God is the source of everything. So God is not a human being. It's not like us. So God is more than that. But we are not ready to understand exactly what God is and how God works. But here, the Spirits and Kardec, they give us a hint of how can we prove that God exists, how can we understand that God exists, and how can we understand how he works, just observing nature. We see the perfection of nature, how nature works around us, the beauty of having a beautiful sunny day, for example, here in Georgia during this end of the fall. It's not even winter and we are already having freezing temperatures. But when we look outside, we see the trees, they are losing their leaves, but we know that during springtime, the leaves are going to be back and stronger. So when we understand this natural cycle of how things work and how we work and how the animals around us work, and when we see that, we can see the perfection of God. So that way we can see that God is perfect. So by observing God's creation, we can understand God. So that is a scientific method that both Kardec and the Spirit ask us to do in our daily lives for us to better understand God and for us to understand that God exists. Because we are not ready to fully understand God, but we can have some tips and some glimpses of how God is by looking at God's creation. Also, as I said that I was going to talk about the social science, not about the physical science, not about the natural science, but about the social science, for us to better understand how we can see the science in the Spiritism is looking at the law of society. So there is a chapter in the Spirit's book that talks specifically about the law of society. And if we go to this question that I brought here, question 766, Kardec is asking, is social life founded in nature? And they say, certainly, God made human beings to live in a society. God has given human beings speech and the other faculties they need for a social life for our purpose. So we know here, like they explain very well here, that we are human beings, we live in a society, and we need a society in order to improve. Later, they say here, for example, if we wanted to live in isolation, that would be useless to us because we cannot improve without having the social interactions. So we need social interactions for us to improve, for us to better understand our weaknesses and our strengths, and to learn with one another. So if we need society to improve, if we were created to live in society, we have the social aspect of sciences that we can use here for us to improve ourselves. So when we look at Spiritism, we also have this aspect of science here that we can bring to our lives to improve ourselves. And if we go to the definition of social science, they say social science is any branch of academic study of science that deals with human behavior in its social and cultural aspects. Usually included within the social science are cultural or social anthropology, sociology, psychology, political science, and economics. And there's, when I read this, I like to bring one very specific side of the social science is when we analyze all of the work of Joana de Angelis that was channeled by the medium Divaldo Pereira Franco. When we see Joana de Angelis bringing all this psychological side of Spiritism for us to better understand how our mind works, how our spirit works, it is social science. So if we see all the books by Joana de Angelis, it is social science that she's bringing to us for us to better understand us, for us to better have this knowledge of us and how we work in a society. So that is a good example for us to understand why Spiritism is a science and how we can apply that science in our daily life. And one example, so I'm bringing here three different methods of social science for us to see what this methodology is, and how we can find it in Spiritism, and how can we use that in our own lives, in our daily activities. So the first one is ethnography. Ethnography, it is a descriptive study of a particular human society or the process of making such a study. Contemporary ethnography is based almost entirely on field work and requires the complete immersion of the anthropologist in the culture and everyday life of the people who are the subject of this study. So one example of this, for example, if I want to better understand how indigenous people live in the Amazon forest, I go there and I stay like 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, living with them, observing that, and seeing how they live, so I can better understand that people, so I can better understand that their culture, being immersed in that culture. So it's one example that we have, and we can do that. We can replicate that in many different societies, many different group of peoples that we have. You want to better understand, for example, how Gen Z lives today. I can stay for a month or a few months just living within a group of Gen Z to better understand them, so I can see how they live. I can see what is different between Gen Z and Gen X and millennials. So that's a few ways for us to use this methodology to better understand some groups within our own society. And then we go again to Spiritism, and we have this question here in the Gospel according to Spiritism. So Kardec is asking, is it reprehensible to observe the imperfections of others, even if there cannot be any profit for them, and if one does not disclose them? So here Kardec is talking like, if I'm here, like if I here in my own group of people, if I start observing how people interact and I see their imperfections, it is okay, or it is wrong for me to do that. Or the same thing, if I go to another place, to another city, to another country, and I start seeing what aspects of them, of their social life I do not understand, or I do not like or agree with, is that okay? And Spiritists, they say here, it all depends on one's intention. Certainly, it's not forbidden to see evil where evil exists. What is wrong is to turn this observation for the detriment of others by decrying and unnecessary in public opinion. It is quite different when, by throwing a veil on someone's evil before the public, one contents oneself with observing it for personal gain. That is to say, studying oneself to avoid what one blames in others. So here the spirits are saying, okay, if I try to do this, if I try to do this kind of observation, study, or practice, or if I've observed people around me and I see their imperfections, is that okay? It depends on the intention. For example, if I'm just observing others for me to see, okay, I do not like that thing that person does, so let me try not to do that, or let me try to somehow to see if it is something really wrong and that person can improve. Let me try to help that person. Or a few times I may think it's an imperfection, but it is actually not. So there's many varieties here. There are many ways for us to see it here, but it's basically the spirits are saying that, yes, we can observe others. Yes, we can see the imperfection or the evil around us, because as we evolve, it's normal for us to see evil where evil exists, because we are going to better understand the good and the evil and to better know things around us. So if I see evil around me and I notice that, that is a way for me to see that, okay, maybe I'm already improving. And by doing that, I can also look at myself and see the evil inside me, see my imperfections. So as the spirits say here, it all depends on the intention. So it all depends on the intention of this observation. So many times it's not reprehensible for us to do that. But if we just do that to point fingers to others, or to say, okay, I'm better than that person, or to tell bad things about the person, like gossiping around, saying that person does this and that, that is reprehensible, because we are not taking any goodness out of that. We are not using that information that we are observing or gathering to improve the society where we live. But if we do this observation in order to improve ourselves, to improve the ones around us, to improve the society, that is something that it's good for us to do. So we can see that this way of this methodology, let's say here, the scientific methodology that we see social science working, we also see Spiritism using that. But of course, with good intention and in order for us to help the society where we live. And here I want us to take a look at the book Heaven and Hell, because for me it's a great example of that. If we see the book Heaven and Hell, we have two parts of the book. The second part is the one when we have different communications that Kardec compiled for us. So there were communications that Kardec received, and he is using those communications for us to analyze those group of spirits. For example, we have suicidals, we have repentant spirits, we have happy spirits, we have different categories of spirits. They are giving their own narrative from the spiritual world, talking a little bit about how they live here on earth and where they see themselves now in the spiritual world. So we can see that Kardec compiled that, going back to the questions, to the answer from the spirits. Kardec compiled that with a good intention for us to use that in order for us to see what waits for us in the spiritual world, depending on how we act here on earth. So Kardec is using this observation to improve us, to improve the society where we live. So he's bringing all this information in a way for us to read those stories and for us to take whatever we can from those stories for us to better ourselves, or at least try not to go to the same path from those spirits who we see now suffering. So I brought here just two short phrases from two different spirits. The first one is from Lemaire. He is a repentant criminal. He is in this category that Kardec says are repentant criminals. So he says that, I regret only my crimes. If I had to do all over again, I wouldn't succumb. I wanted to ascend too quickly and ask for more than I was capable of. I thought I was strong, and so I chose a tough trial, but I gave it to the temptations of evil. So here Kardec is bringing this information, he's bringing this story for us, not for us to point out to and see that is a suffering spirit because he deserved that. No, we are not. It's not that Kardec's intention. The intention is for us, to each one of us, to see that and to understand that he regrets the crimes that he committed. So, and he is giving us this advice: do not commit crimes, or do not try to ask for more than you are capable for during your trials. Try to do whatever you can to not succumb to the evil. So here is an example that we can see here. We can read that. We can observe this example from this spirit and try to use that in our own life. We can reflect on that. We can try to use this example and to use this recommendation in our own lives. And the other one is the spirit didn't give the name. He says he is a bored spirit, and this one Kardec put him in the hardened spirits category. So he says this: I have been condemned to idleness, which among us is suffering. Anything that is not joy is suffering. Boredom is the child of idleness. I didn't know how to employ the lengthy years I spent on earth, and the consequences have been reflected in this world. So there's a spirit, he's saying that he didn't use the years that he had here on earth in a good way. Like he didn't try to improve himself, he didn't try to do a good work. He was just idle here during his last incarnation. And as a consequence, when he went to the spiritual world, he was bored. He was within those spirits that he called bored spirits. So he's giving us this advice. By observing this life, by observing this example, we can see, okay, maybe I cannot be idle here. I need to do something useful during my years here on planet Earth. So that's a way that Kardec is bringing this story for us, again, for us to better understand what the spirit went through here on earth and what's the consequence that he saw in the spiritual world, and for us not to follow his path. I mean, not to follow this path that led him to stay in the spiritual world suffering, so we can make the change that we need now. Don't need to go through that to learn this lesson. We can learn this lesson by reading this example. So those are two examples of this observation that we can do with the spirits around us. It can be either discarnate spirits, as is in the case of heaven and hell, but we can also do that by observing the incarnate spirits, our fellow human beings here on earth, and to see what they do and how they live, and so we can try to better follow good examples that we see around us. Another one that I wanted to bring here is content analysis. This is another methodology that is really used in social sciences. And it is, content analysis is a research tool used to determine the presence of certain words, themes, or concepts within some given qualitative data, that is the text. Using content analysis, researchers can quantify and analyze the presence, meanings, and relationships of certain words, themes, or concepts. I'm going to give just a short example before we see that within Spiritism. For example, if we are doing like this, we can do that in journalism or communications. If we apply content analysis to a research project, I can, for example, read like 2, 3, 4 books and analyze the content within those books to see what is the goal of their books or how they are using that. Or I can analyze a marketing campaign, for example, to see how they are using the text within this marketing campaign to reach their goal. I mean, to reach the consumers that they want to reach. So there are many different ways for us to use content analysis here in social science. And now here I'm bringing an example from the gospel for us to see. It's not only Spiritism that uses content analysis, but if we go way back to the time that Jesus was here within us, we see here in John when Jesus is saying, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, for many false prophets have gone out into the world." So Jesus is saying here for us to be aware about false prophets. And there is also a chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism when Kardec is talking about the false prophets. But if you see here, the way that Jesus is saying, is asking us to test the spirits to see if they were from God. And if we are talking here, for example, about prophets or people that claim to be talking in the name of God, how is the best way for us to see that? One of the ways for us to see that is exactly doing the content analysis, analyzing what that spirit or what that person is saying. So by seeing what the person is saying, we can see, okay, is this according to what Jesus said and did while he was here on earth. Is according to the teachings that we see from the apostles, is according to the teachings that we see from the Spiritism, so we can analyze what those prophets or what any kind of people around us are saying, to see if the content is good or bad. And that's something that we see that Kardec tells us a lot, when, especially when he is talking about for us to analyze the communications that we receive from the spirits. He also asks us to analyze the communication. So we need to analyze the context of the communications before we approve or before we decide if this communication is good or bad. And he also says, like, if we go to the Medium's book, there's a part of the Medium's book when Kardec talked about the spirits who signed communications pretending to be another spirit. And he says that's a lot of cases that the spirits go and do that. They sign as St. Augustine, they can sign as Jesus, for example. But by analyzing those texts, by analyzing those messages, we can see if those messages are good or not. We can see the context of those messages, and we can compare that to the teachings that we have from Jesus and from all these good spirits that Spiritism brought to us. And if you go again to the Gospel according to Spiritism, in this chapter about false prophets, we have here what the spirits bring it to us. They say, "It is thus, dear brothers and sisters, that you must judge. It is the deeds that you should examine. If those who claim to be clothed with divine power bear all signs of such a mission, in other words, if they possess to the highest degree the eternal Christian values of charity, love, indulgence, and kindness, which reconciles all hearts, and if in support of their words they add their actions, only then you will be able to say these are truly, definitely in voice of God." So Kardec is always saying here, and the spirits are always saying here, for us to analyze, to observe before accepting any truth, before accepting any communications that we receive, no matter if it is from a spirit, discarnate spirit, but also for us incarnate spirits. Today, there are so many people, like, it's so easy for us to spread the word today. So there are so many people like talking on YouTube channels, on TikTok, on Instagram, so many different social media. So it's very easy for anyone just to a cell phone to record a video and put the video out there, and they can pretend they are doing that with a good purpose, or they're bringing good words for us, but we always need to analyze. We need to analyze all the content that we have out there before we accepting that content. So that this is something that Kardec and the spirits, they brought. If we see, Jesus brought that for us like 2,000 years ago, and then Kardec in the 1800s brought that to us again. And today, more than ever, we need to apply that, especially when we are talking here about us incarnate spirits, because it's so easy for us to be deceived today. We have the AI that can generate videos and pretending to be other people. We have people themselves like easily uploading content online. So more than ever, we need to analyze. We need to use this kind of analysis for us to better understand all the messages that we are receiving, and so we can filter those messages and accept and keep only which is good. And one more method that I brought here for us is, as we saw Kardec talking about, to observe and experiment, I brought this experimental method as well. And here, Kardec talks about that in the book Genesis, because he says, as it means of formulation, Spiritism proceeds in exactly the same way of the positivistic sciences. That is to say, it applied the experimental method. Facts of a new order emerge that cannot be explained by known laws. We observe them, we compare them, analyze them, and by studying the effects, going back to their causes, we arrive at the law that governs them. Then we infer their consequences and look for useful applications. So here, Kardec is saying that we need to use this methodology of observing, comparing, experimenting so we can better understand the world we live in, these laws that govern us, and we can better apply them in our own good. And so, talking about this experimental method, I wanted to close this talk bringing this uh, bringing this example of Saint Augustine from the Spirit's book, question 919, when Kardec asked about what is the most effective method for guaranteeing self-improvement and resisting the attractions of wrongdoing. And then we have this answer from St. Augustine. I didn't bring the whole answer. It's like 3-4 pages, but I brought just part of it. So he says, a philosopher of antiquity once said, know thyself and do what I myself used to do during my life on earth. And at the end of each day, I would assess my conscience, review everything that I had done, and I would ask myself whether I had failed in some duty, whether someone might have reason to complain of me. It was thus that I arrived at knowing myself and in seeing that what there was in me that needed to be reformed. So when we are talking about this experiment, we are here experimenting because we are here living like trying to understand who we are, trying to understand how we will react in certain situations, and to trying to become each day better persons. So as I said in the beginning of this talk, like the main goal of each one of us here on earth is to become better persons. We are here for that reason. We are here on planet Earth, and we reincarnate again and again and again in a way for us to improve. That's what the spirits explain to us. That reincarnation is a way for us to learn and to improve. So in order for us to do that, we need to each day have this self-knowledge. So this way that St. Augustine, he brings that to us, he's saying that at the end of each day, he went back and saw the actions that he did during that day, all the things that people do to him, around him, everything, all the way he reacts. And then he can better understand how he reacted to each of that situation, and he can better know himself and see the way that what he needs to do to improve. So that is a way that is asking us to do the same. So what and how can we do that? We can try to follow the same way that St. Augustine is doing here. So at the end of the day, or at the end of any difficult situation, we can just look back and see what went wrong, what went well, and how we could improve, and how, for example, just seeing the way we react in certain situations, we can better understand what triggers us, for example, to be mad at certain situations, why I am anxious in certain aspects of my life, what makes me react in a certain way. So by doing that, I can better understand myself. So that is also a way for me, when we talked about experimenting, observing, and analyzing. This goal of Spiritism is for us to observe and analyze ourselves and do this trials, this experimentation in our own lives. So for me, by changing my actions, I can see the way that better works for me in certain situations. For example, I was talking about social media. That's something that I really enjoy talking and bringing to Spiritism as well. Because social media is a good tool, but many times we are not, they can also bring some anxiety to us. If you use that a lot, we can also bring some envy to us, depending on how we use, because it's very easy for us, for example, to see all the posts of people on social media and see, because usually people upload happy moments of their lives or their vacations or the good places they go. So when we look at social media, it's very easy for us to have this idea that the world is living a happy life, and then we look at our own lives and we see, okay, but I'm not as happy as that people around me, what's happening, what's wrong, and that can bring me envy, that can bring me anxiety, that can bring to me sadness, depression. Like there are many different sentiments that can come with this use of social media. So if that is the case for me, for example, what can I do? I can reduce the amount of time I use social media. I can use people, I can change people I follow there, and I can do this experimentation and that observation. Okay, let me try today, instead of like using social media during the whole day, let me limit that like to like a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the evening, and then at the end of the day, let me see how I feel about that. If it works, okay, I learned something. If it doesn't work, if it's not useful for me, the next day, let me change. Let me try to do some other thing. Let me try to change the feeds that I watch to see if by changing that, it can change my feelings during the day. So I can change that, my routine. I can change the way that I consume the social media, or I can try to analyze what am I consuming, why it's this not good for me. So that's just a way I just bring in here social media just for us to have an actual example from something that we have a lot going on today, for us to see how we can use this advice from St. Augustine from the 1800s to our life here in the 21st century, to see how it's still up to date, all these teachings that we have from Spiritism. So it's just one way for us to observe that and to use that for us to have the self-knowledge. And I think that all this methods and all these tips that we saw here through the talks, they are little tips, but they are good ones that we can use first to better understand why Spiritism is a science, and two, to understand how we can use these methods that Spiritism bring to us, and these methods and this all these tips that Spiritism bring to us, for us to really better know ourselves and reach our goal here, which is to evolve and to become each day better persons.
Thank you very, very much, Marcelo, for the wonderful insights and reflections on these practical insights for life that you brought us today. Everyone, please stay with us for the Q&A session, which will start shortly after just a few announcements. There's a new virtual course, Introduction to Mediumship, which is a free virtual course for beginners. The U.S. Spiritist Federation is thrilled to invite individuals eager to explore the realm of spirit communication according to Spiritism. Check out the new course at learn.spiritist.us or scan the QR code on the flyer. And be certain to check out the continuing podcast-like series, Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life, based on the works by Joanna De Angelis. There's a new episode which appears every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It is available on YouTube and Spotify. Are you curious about what lies beyond the veil of death? Join us on a profound journey of exploration as we delve into the mysteries of the afterlife with a new book, Transcendence, Life and the Hereafter by Gisard Korngold. It is available at the Spiritist Books store. And there is a wonderful Spiritist app, Be My Hope, available from the App Store and Google Play. This app offers uplifting content and a collection of videos, daily messages, and audio materials. Download it today. And there's now available 7 free professionally recorded Spiritist audiobooks, sponsored and produced by the Spiritist Society of the Carolinas. At your own pace, you can listen to Allan Kardec's foundational works on YouTube at Spiritist Society Carolinas. And you will note on the screen there's a QR code. If you want to help the USSF produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, scan the QR code on your screen for your donation. Now, let's start addressing those comments and questions from the audience. There's still time to send in yours. As we cannot touch, as we cannot touch or see thoughts scientifically, can't faith and spirits be valid in both science and spiritism?
Oh, that's a good one. And that's one that we always, usually we hear that question and in the study groups. And that's interesting because Kardec, he always talks about the rational faith. So Spiritism brings to us this rational faith, that it brings to us the tools and all the components and all the reasoning for us to understand that, both in the scientific aspect and in this philosophical and religious aspect. So both faith and the spirits, they are valid if we look at the question, if we see the faith, because we see that Kardec, as the question that I brought about what is God, and the spirit is explaining that we need to observe around us, everything around us, to understand God. So we see the reasons why God exists. We see the complexity of this universe, and even science, they try to understand, they try to explain many different things about the universe, and every time we have more questions, and we see that there is higher intelligence behind that. So it's not something that we can understand or we can comprehend right now, but we use this, like the human science or the social science, to understand that it's still something that we cannot like measure, we cannot see through the science, like the science that we have, the same science that we use to see the planets, to see the sun and all the galaxies that we have around, or the same science that we use to see like a virus, or to better understand how this microorganism work around us. But it's a different kind of science, the science of reasoning, the science of observation that we can use to strengthen our faith and to prove that spirits exist, like just reading all this work from Kardec. And a good way, like Kardec, for example, he wasn't receiving all these communications from one person, one medium, one spirit. They were coming from different places around the world. And at a time that we did not have internet, so it wasn't a fast communication, something that we could, someone receiving a communication here could send it to the other part of the one world, so we can see some charlatan could replicate that easily. It was something that would come through letters, through mail. So we can really see that that movement was happening in different parts at the same time from the same source.
Very helpful. Thank you, Marcelo. And how can we measure improvement of good behavior in our own selves?
Yeah. That's each one of us, we are the only ones who can really do that, because that the spirit says is about intention. Because many times we can observe others and we can think that others are improving or not, but we never know the intention. We never know what's happening here inside of each one of us. Only we know about ourselves, and it's not something that like. And many times this improvement that we talk about is not something huge, like it's not something that we will see like a whole transformation within weeks or even months or even a lifetime. Because again, going to heaven and hell, one of the spirits there, she says that when she sees her life here on earth, it feels like she didn't improve at all. But she says, I know we are always improving. We know that we are all improving, but those seems to be like really tiny steps, not something huge that happened. But we can see, we can measure this improvement if we analyze like how we were a few years ago, a few, especially if you look like longer term, like we don't need to look like yesterday and today or last week. But if we look how I was a few years ago, things that made me act in a way that I didn't like or in a way that wasn't appropriate a few years ago, and the same things today, how I act or I react. Many times for me, a good way to see my improvement is through my thoughts, because we may hide our reactions from others, we may hide our words from others, but it's difficult for us to hide our thoughts to ourselves. So when I analyze the thoughts that I have at certain situations, then I can see if I'm improving or not, because I may not have the same outside reaction to a situation, but I can see like if the same thoughts are still coming to my mind, it seems that I still need to work on improving myself. But we are the only ones that can measure that. There's no machine for that yet.
True. Thank you for that. Another question, is evil a behavioral defiance against the goodness created by God?
Well, that's a good one. Good questions. If evil is a behavior defiance against the goodness created by God, if you see like what we understand, like by studying all the Spiritism and all the codification by Kardec, we see that God did not create evil. Evil is something that we are the ones who created that, and many times the evil, like because I think the concept that we have of evil might many times, at least the concept that I used to have is different from what I think actually evil is. Because for me, evil is when you say that evil is the lack of goodness. Uh, Evil, I would see evil as ignorance, for example, because if I have some evil reactions, if I have some evil behavior, actually it's because I don't know how to do any better, or because I haven't learned to do any better. Because we know that we evolve, we do not go back, and each time we really learn a lesson, we won't commit that same mistake again. So if I'm committing some evil, if I'm having some evil behaviors, is because I haven't learned how to be good in that certain situations because of my own ignorance, or because I need to have more effort. So I wouldn't say that is going against like the goodness created by God, but maybe it is a lack of understanding of this goodness of God. Because the moment that we truly understand how God is good, how God is love, and we can really understand this love and connect ourselves to this love, evil won't exist anymore. But we are not there yet. We are here in a world of trials and expiation, going to a world of regeneration, and we see that's a long path ahead of us until we achieve a world, a happy world, and then we may one day go to a divine world. So we see we are, like, I would say, in the middle of this process of evolution. We do not have a certain idea, like do not know for sure how long it takes and where we are. But if we see that all the planets and the different categories of planets that we have, could say we are like in this middle, because we are right in this transition into this world of regeneration, of a little behind this middle, but there is still a good way ahead of us. So we do not understand God, we do not understand love, we do not understand goodness. That's why evil is to exist, because of lack of understanding from our part.
Thank you. Very, very helpful thoughts on that. We have another question. How do we balance science and spiritism, or any faith, when developing our beliefs foundation?
I think a good way, like I think the way that Kardec explains that's really beautiful when he talks about like science, about having this belief of have this foundation of our beliefs in science, religion, and philosophy, because we need these three aspects, and we may try to see the three aspects separately, but it's once we bring the three of them together that we have, for example, Spiritism. It's once that we bring the three of them together that we strengthen our faith and our beliefs. So I think is that is the foundation of any belief that we have. And today we may see that with Spiritism, but if you look at other religions, we do have the religious aspect, we do have the philosophical aspect. Maybe we do not have the same scientific aspects that we have with Spiritism, but I think as the world evolves, as we have more knowledge from science coming to us, and from, when I say science, from many different science, like the more knowledge that we have, the more reasoning we can make, and so we will have this rational faith, as Kardec explained. So I think we need to really need to combine the three of them. They are the foundation, the truly foundation of our beliefs.
Encouraging thoughts. Thank you, sir. And we have another question. Can we ever reach a point in our earthly life in which we know ourselves?
I'm talking about, I can talk about myself. I don't think so. I think we are, again, the point we are today, we are not able to really know ourselves or understand ourselves. It's really difficult because we're still like in our childhood of like our spiritual life. So we cannot say that we can truly know ourselves, because we may think we do, but once we, for example, I may think I may think that I know how to react and how to be a calm and a serene person, but it may be easy in the environment where I live, but maybe one day I will face a new environment, some environment I've never faced before in this existence, and I will have a reaction that I was not expecting. So it means that I didn't know myself as much as I thought I knew. So we can only be sure that we know ourselves once we can truly know how we react to different situations, and we can not only know that, but we can prove that by being in those different situations. And I mean, I think it's really difficult for us to see that at least in this one earthly life we can know ourselves. Maybe in the future, after like several earthly lives, new reincarnations here on earth, maybe we'll be able, but I don't think so.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Marcelo, for being here today and for the presentation. And many thanks to everyone who watched today's Talk Live and those who have been following our weekly Spiritist Talk series. Next Saturday, December 14th at 11 a.m., we will have the fourth episode of the U.S. Spiritist Movement in Action, Spiritist Literature, with Gisela Korngold, Andrea Marcianetto, and Marcelo Neto. Marcelo, before we close today, would you please offer a prayer?
Sure. Well, dear God, beloved Master Jesus, guardian angels, and all the benefactors that are here helping us in our daily struggles, thank you so much for this day, for this talk, and for this opportunity of being here among incarnate and discarnate friends. Please, God, allow us to be able to each day grow more and more towards you, going through the right path, following Jesus' example, and examples of so many good spirits that we have around us. Please let us keep this beautiful light that we have today within us during this weekend, during the next week, So we can always be connected to you, can always be going to the right path, doing goodness, and evolving today more and more. Thank you so much, and so be it.